In this video, we will be discussing about sodium imbalance. Sodium is one of the most important electrolyte in our body. So what is the normal serum sodium values? So normal lies between 135 and 145. Coming to the basics that we must know about sodium, how does it get into our body? So it cannot be generated in the body and is an essential micronutrient. How does it get absorbed? From the GI tract. And how does it get excreted? From stool, sweat, but kidney is the main regulator of the sodium balance and is the principal site of sodium excretion. There is some loss from stool, but it is minimal unless there is diarrhea. And one more thing we must remember here is that if there is excessive glucose in blood, it enhances the sodium absorption. Why? Because of presence of co-transporter. Next, coming to some key points that we must keep in our mind when we deal with sodium. So sodium concentration is not mainly because of the sodium balance, but determined by the water balance. And kidney is the primary site in achieving balance. What are the regulatory systems? So there are two main regulatory systems. One is ADH and other is RAS mechanism. We will quickly brush up through these concepts. Consider a condition where there is some water deficit, hypovolemic state. So what will happen? There will be increased extracellular osmolarity, which is detected by the osmoreceptors, and it will stimulate posterior pituitary to increase ADH. Now what this ADH does? It will increase the water permeability in the distal tubules and collecting ducts, which in turn will increase the water reabsorption, eventually covering up for the water deficit. Next is the RAS mechanism. So again, in case of any hypovolemia, renin will be released from the kidney. What will renin do? Renin will convert angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. Angiotensin is from liver, right? So this angiotensin 1 is again converted into angiotensin 2 by angiotensin converting enzyme, which is released from lungs. Now there are two works of angiotensin 2. First is that it will stimulate adrenal gland to release aldosterone, and aldosterone in turn acts on the kidney to stimulate water and sodium reabsorption. The other work is that it will directly act on the blood vessels, causing vasoconstriction, which in turn helps in increasing the BP. First, we will see hyponatremia. So how is it classified? Acute or chronic based on the time. If it is developing within 48 hours, then it is acute. Based on the severity, when do we call it mild, moderate or severe? So anything less than 135 is hyponatremia. If it is 130 to 135, then it is mild. If it is 125 to 130, it is moderate, and less than 125 is severe. What is the etiology behind decreasing sodium? We already have seen that increased in glucose will have an effect on sodium absorption. So here we will use it in case of hyperglycemia. There will be a hyperosmolar state which will cause the decrease in the sodium by shifting the sodium into the cells. Similar is for mannitol, which will cause a hyperosmolar condition. Now coming to hyperlipidemia and hyperproteinemia. These two, increase in lipid or increase in protein, will cause an artifact in the sodium level, and it will show false low levels of sodium. Hence it is called pseudohypernatremia. Next, based on the fluid status of the body, it can be hypovolemic, euvolemic or hypervolemic. In what conditions do we see this? Hypovolemic means there is some loss. So it can be either renal loss or extrarenal loss. Extrarenal loss, we know if there is any vomiting or diarrhea or third space loss. Even in burns, when there is excessive water loss from the skin, that is also considered as hypovolemic state, which will in turn lead to hyponatremia. And what are the renal losses? When there is polyuria. When there will be polyuria, when there are diuretics used, or this is the most important thing that you must remember, that is cerebral salt wasting. Next, euvolemic condition, when the fluid status of the body is doing fine, but still there is hyponatremia. Most important cause you must remember in this category is SIADH. Apart from that, we have antidepressant medication, water intoxication, hypothyroidism, desmopressin acetate. Then when do we have fluid overload but there is hyponatremia? That is dilutional hyponatremia. We see this in condition of heart failure, nephrotic syndrome, capillary leak due to sepsis, or even liver failure due to cirrhosis, or there is acute or chronic kidney injury. So in any case, when there is ascites, when there is fluid overload, we can see dilutional hyponatremia. Since we now know what are the conditions when it occurs, so what will happen when there is hyponatremia? When there is a hyponatremia, there will be gradient that is created. Means there will be comparatively more sodium inside the cell and lesser outside. To balance this, water will be dragged into the cell. So it will cause cells to swell. This is true for brain cells also. So there will be increased intracranial pressure, which will in turn impair the cerebral blood flow. So because of this, what can happen? Because of the raised ICP, there can be brainstem herniation. Because of the brainstem herniation, there can be apnea, and respiratory support might be a requirement. And it also impairs cerebral blood flow, which will also trigger headache, seizure. Apart from this, there will be lethargy, confusion, and symptoms like nausea, vomiting, malaise. there will be decreased reflexes in this case. And other minor symptoms will be muscle cramps and weakness. If you ask me which is the most deadliest symptom that can occur, or deadliest clinical condition that can occur if a patient goes into hyponatremia, is this raised intracranial pressure, which can lead to brainstem herniation, respiratory failure, and death. So how do you approach a case of hyponatremia? First thing, you have to make a note of plasma osmolarity. So if you can't send serum osmolarity in your center, then just calculate it. 2 into sodium plus 1 by 2.8 plus glucose by 18. If this is also not possible, then just calculate the working formula 2 into sodium. Now we know it is more, normal or less. If it is more, then it is hyperosmolar state. We already know it is because of either mannitol or it is because of glucose. If it is in the normal lane, then it is pseudohyponatremia. Means there is no actual decrease in sodium, because if it would have been there, there would be some osmolarity shift. So we see it in conditions of hyperproteinemia and hyperlipidemia. If it is less than 275, then we have to see urine osmolarity. Why do we need to see urine osmolarity? Because to differentiate between the primary polydipsia and remaining other causes. If it is less than 100 milliosmolars per liter, then it is primary polydipsia. If it is more, then see the fluid status. If it is hypervolemic, euvolemic, or hypovolemic. We have already seen when does hypervolemia, euvolemic, and hypovolemic hyponatremia does occur. So what should be our next step? Next step would be to see the urine sodium to understand whether it is a renal loss or an extrarenal loss. In case of euvolemia, it is very simple that it is most common cause is SIADH. Apart from that, if there is any cortisol deficiency or hypothyroidism, then we will see euvolemic hyponatremia. In case of hypervolemia, means there is fluid overload, but there is urine sodium more than 20, means there is some sodium loss. Kidney is not functioning well. There is renal insufficiency. In case of fluid overload with less than 10 urine sodium, means what? It is some other extrarenal cause, that is heart failure, cirrhosis, or nephrotic syndrome. Next, hypovolemic hyponatremia, in which urine sodium is more than 20, means there is renal loss. Most important cause being cerebral salt wasting. Apart from that, if there is any recent diuretic use, then also we will see. And if sodium is less than 10, then it is some extrarenal cause. So once again, coming to the approach, first thing, serum osmolarity. Is it low, it is normal, or it is high? If it is high, it is hyperosmolar hyponatremia. If it is normal, then it is pseudohyponatremia. If it is low, then it is either primary polydipsia or any of the hypo-U or hypervolemic states. To differentiate between hyper-U and hypovolemic state and polydipsia, we do urine osmolarity. If it is less than 100, then it is primary polydipsia. If it is more than 100, then it is any three of this. Now you know the volume status. Then coming to the urine sodium, to determine whether it is a renal loss or an extrarenal loss. If urine sodium is more than 20, in any case it is renal loss. If it is less than 10, then it is extrarenal cause. In case of hypervolemia, less than 10, it is heart failure, cirrhosis, or nephrotic syndrome. In case of more than 20, it is renal insufficiency. Euvolemia, do not forget SIADH. Hypovolemia, you think of cerebral salt wasting and diuretic use, most common causes. And if it is and if urine sodium is less than 10, then it is some extrarenal loss. Coming to the management part, if it is acute or symptomatic hyponatremia, then you have to immediately give 3% NS as a bolus, 5 ml per kg over 30 to 60 minutes. Usually, just an increase by 4 to 5 milliequivalents per liter can improve the symptoms immediately. In case of chronic hyponatremia, like hypovolemic, hypervolemic, or euvolemic, that is SIADH, you have to manage the case accordingly. If there is SIADH, then main thing is water restriction. If it doesn't still work out, then you give IV furosemide. In case of hypovolemia, you have to correct this hypovolemic state by restoring the circulation. You have to give fluid resuscitation with NS bolus. Next is hypervolemic hyponatremia. Then what we will do? We will do sodium and water restrictions along with plus or minus diuretics use. So how much correction rate is safe? We know that there is a risk for central pontine myelinosis in case of rapid correction. So maximum level that is acceptable and safe to correct is 10 to 12 milliequivalents per liter on first day and up to 18 milliequivalent per liter over first 2 days. Next, coming to hypernatremia. Hypernatremia is defined as serum sodium more than 145. So what is the most common cause that can lead to hypernatremia is decreased water intake. So if there is excess sodium in the body, how can sodium get into the body? When your intake is more. So either it is sodium excess or water is less, water deficit, or in case of hypotonic fluid loss. So conditions where sodium can be excess is when you are giving a improperly mixed formula, or there is hyperaldosteronism that you must keep in mind, and iatrogenic causes like excess sodium bicarbonate use or IV hypertonic saline. So when will be water deficit? In case of DI, diabetes insipidus, and if the intake is inadequate or there is any losses. Also of hypotonic fluid loss can lead to hypernatremia, as in cases of GI loss, renal loss, osmotic diuresis, diabetes mellitus, CKD. What will be the features of hypernatremia? CNS symptoms will definitely depend on how severe is the hypernatremia. There will be brain hemorrhage that we have to keep in mind, and symptoms similar to hyponatremia, that is lethargic, restlessness, irritable, and some infants can have high-pitched cry and hyperapnea. Since we have seen water deficit is the most common cause, dehydration has to be looked for. There is shift of water from ICS to ECS to preserve the intravascular volume. This maintains the BP and urine output, but signs of dehydration would be present. Always consider dehydration in case of hypernatremia. This will not manifest early because of intravascular volume preservation. We have to still look at the child clinically and take action immediately. Coming to approach of hypernatremia, first you will look after ECF volume. If it is hypovolemia, which is in most cases, then you next see for urine volume and urine osmolarity. So urine volume more than 1000 ml per day, then we will see urine osmolarity. Normal urine osmolarity will be around 300 to 800 milliosmoles. If it is less than 300, means it is low urine osmolarity, then also we will see the response to desmopressin. Response to desmopressin means desmopressin is an analog to vasopressin. So if you are giving desmopressin and there is a improvement, then it is central diabetes insipidus, because in central diabetes insipidus there is ADH deficiency. In case of peripheral diabetes insipidus, the kidney will not respond to the ADH. Hence, desmopressin response will not be seen. Also, if urine osmolarity is 300 to 800, but urine osmolars is less than 900, then also you will rule out diabetes insipidus. If urine osmolars excreted per day is more than 900, means there is some hyperosmolar agent that is getting excreted which is causing hypernatremia, that is osmotic diuresis. In case of mannitol use or glycosuria, we will see this condition. If urine volume is less than 800 and urine osmolarity is also less than 800, then it is some extrarenal loss. What if it is a hypervolemic state? Few DDs for hypervolemic hypernatremia, that is sodium overload or hyperaldosteronism. So what did we see? What is the volume status and what is the need for resuscitation? If the child is having hypovolemia, then we will primarily resuscitate with 10 to 20 ml per kg NS or RL bolus. Then we can give free water correction. How do we do that? 0.6 into weight into current plasma or serum sodium by 140 minus 1. Then, what should be the rate of hypernatremia correction? It should not be more than 10 to 12 milliequivalent per liter per day. Then, how to address ongoing fluid loss? So, we have to definitely give maintenance, plus we will also give the replacement. If we are seeing hypernatremia, we have to think what must be the cause of hypernatremia. If it is diabetes insipidus, further evaluation is required, desmopressin acetate challenge test is required, and it should be addressed accordingly. I hope this video was useful. For further such simplified and practical concepts, do subscribe to the channel. Thank you.